So, have you ever stopped to think about what really truly powers our world? I mean, it's not just oil, it's not just data. At the most fundamental level, it's grain. We're talking corn, wheat, and rice. These three things form the absolute foundation of our global food system. They're the literal calorie base for all of civilization. I mean, think about this for a second. More than 40% of all the energy we humans consume comes from just these three plants. They take up nearly half of all the farmland on the entire planet. The scale is it's staggering. So you see, these aren't just commodities. They are the bedrock of our societies. Okay, so that leads to the big question, right? How does this incredibly complex system that feeds billions of people actually work? How do these grains get from a farm in Brazil to a dinner table in Egypt? How are they priced? And what can their movements tell us about the health of the entire globe? Well, let's dive in and break it all down. To really get a handle on the system, you've got to understand the players. And here's the thing. While corn, wheat, and rice might seem totally different, they all share this kind of common economic DNA, a set of fundamental rules that pretty much governs how they all behave on the world stage. So this DNA, it's basically made of four key traits. First, you can store them for a really long time, which is huge because it lets us build up inventories to handle shocks. Second, they can be substituted for each other, especially when you're talking about animal feed. Third, they have what we call dual-use demand, so not just for food, but also for animal feed and even for fuel. And last but not least, governments are always getting involved. These four traits, well, they're the code we need to crack. All right, so even though they share that same basic DNA, each of the big three has its own very distinct personality, its own role to play in the global economy. So let's get to know them, shall we? First up, you've got corn. Corn is the anchor of the whole system. By sheer volume, it's the world's biggest grain crop, and it's by far the most versatile. It's the backbone of animal feed, a key ingredient in all sorts of processed foods, and, this is critical, a major source for biofuels like ethanol. It's really the multi-talented workhorse of the group. Next, we have wheat, which traders often call the political grain. And for good reason, because it's a primary food staple that people eat directly. Think bread, pasta. All across Europe, the Middle East, and Asia, it is incredibly politically sensitive. I mean, access to affordable bread can literally make or break governments. That makes wheat absolutely central to food security planning all over the world. And finally, there's rice, the undisputed staple of the global south. It is absolutely essential for almost half the people on Earth. But what makes rice so unique and often so volatile is that while it's grown in these massive, massive quantities, very, very little of it actually gets traded across borders. In this table here, it really summarizes their different worlds perfectly. You can see corn is dominated by the Americas, and it's mostly going to feed animals and power cars. Wheat, well, it's more spread out, with Russia being a huge player, and it serves both food and feed markets. And then there's rice. It's all about Asia, and it's almost entirely for people to eat directly. Now, if we zero in on corn for a second, this is where it gets really interesting. Look at this chart. See that slice for ethanol? About a fifth of the entire U.S. corn crop isn't for eating at all. It's for fuel. And this creates a direct, incredibly powerful link between the price of corn and the price of crude oil. Agriculture and energy are tied at the hip. And here is the big plot twist for rice. Check this out. Only about 10% of all the rice grown in the world ever even crosses a border. So here's why that matters. When a huge exporter, like India, suddenly decides to ban exports to keep its own people fed, the global price can just explode overnight. Why? Because the international market is just that thin. There's not a lot of slack in the system. So how do we keep track of all this? How do traders know when one market is getting stressed out compared to another? Well, the grains actually talk to each other through a kind of secret language, the language of price spreads. A perfect example of this is the wheat-corn spread. See, when wheat is way more expensive than corn, a wide spread, the food and feed markets are kind of separate. But when that spread gets really narrow, it's like a flashing red light. It means wheat is suddenly cheap enough to feed to animals. And when that happens, it tightens the supply that's available for humans. This is a critical warning sign for food security stress that has popped up before major global food crises. The ultimate summary of the market's health is the futures curve. You can think of it like a snapshot of what everyone expects to happen with supply and demand over time. If the curve is sloping up, traders call that contango, it means, hey, supplies are pretty comfortable.
But if it's sloping down, what's called backwardation, that's a signal that inventories are tight and buyers are scrambling for grain right now. The shape of that curve tells you the whole story.
Okay, so we've cracked the code. We get the shared DNA, we get the different personalities, and we've learned a little bit of the market's secret language. But why does any of this really matter to you, to us, in our daily lives? It matters because this whole system, with its shared rules and its unique players, is the invisible architecture of our global economy. How these markets work ends up dictating the price of your groceries, the stability of entire nations, and the flow of global money. And this whole intricate system is constantly being rocked by two giant wildcards: unpredictable government policy and an even more unpredictable global climate. And that really leaves us with one final and pretty crucial question. For centuries, this whole global system has been built on a foundation of relative predictability, seasonal patterns, stable trade routes. But now, in a world of increasing climate shocks, endless supply chain disruptions, and geopolitical conflict, you have to ask, just how strong is that foundation today?